What's up? Welcome to the Exodus Stoic podcast. And today we have a listener episode that we're going to do. And this was from a listener with username, Then You Notice You're Thinking. So thank you. It's an awesome idea. It's going to be misattribution and modern stoicism we're going to talk about. I'm Danny here, my buddy Randy. What's up, Randy?
Here, Danny.
Yeah, so
What
this is
is misattribution and what is modern Stoicism?
I know, right? All these things. Yeah, so misattribution is interesting. This is something we've kind of been talking about already a bit, or we've not directly in a couple other episodes when we were talking about cognitive bias, things like that. So this is where essentially you incorrectly assign a cause or source of like our emotions, memories, or experiences. And so this bias, this cognitive bias can manifest in a lot of different ways. I think there's more than just a few, but a few that, I quickly found were like emotional misattribution. So you're feeling anxious or angry, but you attribute it to the wrong cause. Memory misattribution, recalling an event, but attributing it to the wrong person or time. And then, causal misattribution, blaming like external factors or for an internal issue, stuff like that.
Okay, so
So,
before we get into all of that stuff, let's read
yeah.
the actual comment. So,
Oh, yeah.
in case you guys don't know, we are accepting suggestions for episode ideas, questions that you have because hey, let's make this a back and forth type of thing. So, if you
Yeah.
have
It's nice.
ideas that maybe you want an episode about, or maybe you just want to get a shout out or something like that and you had a good idea for an episode, you can either comment down on the YouTube video or you can email us. The email is found in the show notes. So here's a question. Solving your apparent problems versus taking a modern Stoic stance toward those typical ways to solve them. I think it's a misattribution, feeling bad and think the solution is a new car. Can you take a can you take a podcast to dispel misattributions? That must mean thought errors. Your brain fools yourself because it's costly to follow the problem to the root. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's an interesting one because I mean the modern consumerism is the
Yeah.
typical misattribution. It's like I feel terrible, let me go buy a car.
Well, no, it's true though, right? And I think a lot of people fall into this where like, you feel depressed or something, and so you go shopping, right? Because you're thinking that that little hit you're going to get a dopamine from the purchase, and then you get worse because then you buy something and then it loses its
And
value
you
or you're
buy it on
unhappy with it.
credit. You buy it with money you
Yeah.
don't have. Yeah.
Exactly, right? And I think, and if you really think about it, the messed up thing is our society definitely wants to promote that because it's a consumer society. We want people to spend more than they make. We want them to be in debt because then they're constantly paying these corporations all the time for stuff. And then you're in this sort of cycle of negativity and stuff to feel better, and you just keep making it worse and worse and worse, which is
Yeah.
kind of insane when you think about it.
Well, it's interesting because most of the things that you do to try and feel better, a lot of them are net negative. Like people
Yeah.
scroll on social media or binge watch TV shows or like, as opposed to what are some ideas for things that would make you feel better that are probably hard initially, but they have a big payoff. Exercise, go for a
Yeah.
walk in nature, talk with a friend, cultivate some relationships, all these things, but they're hard up front.
They are. And it's funny because we carry these devices on us now all the time. And it's so easy. And I know, I'm sure you fall into this too. Everybody does, right? You're bored, and so you take out your phone. And it's
Mhm.
like as soon as you do that, that's worse too, because if you start scrolling social media and stuff, your mood just gets worse too, instantly. Because it's just gonna feed you stuff that's gonna get your emotions up, right? So it's like now you were bored, you didn't give yourself a chance to do something or just be bored, and now you're gonna feel even worse. And then you're gonna get a ton of advertisements.
Mhm.
It's funny when he mentioned this, or when person mentioned this one, I it also made me think of like Epicurus's distinction between natural and artificial desire. And the artificial desires specifically are those that like we don't need, and they generally come from external sources. That made me think of like the advertising and stuff too. And this sort of like, because it's not just us, it's also this pressure from outside trying to get us to think this way as well and be this way, which is kind of insane.
Yeah. Well, it is an artificial desire because it's getting you to want something that you don't need. And I heard a story. I haven't actually like done my due diligence on this, so it may not be true, but I think it kind of is true. So
We'll
like
call it
back
anecdotal.
yeah, so like back after one of the world wars, I think it was World War One, they had the military industrial complex churning out like tanks and bullets
Bullets.
and all this
Yeah.
stuff, and it was great because they had jobs. And then the war ended, and right before the war was the Depression. Went to war, everybody had jobs, life improved. And then war ended, and uh-oh, everybody's out of work. And so that's when consumerism really started, is like, we need to figure out a way to sell people stuff that they don't need so that we can have jobs for people so we don't go back to the Depression.
I will say that whether it's true or not, it does sound accurate. Because if you think about it too, you also had all these people returning from the war with money, because they were getting paid. They needed homes because I know there was a rush to build like small starter homes because all these people were coming back and they had no homes and they wanted them to start families because a lot of people died as well. So they have money and you
Hmm.
have this huge, I mean, yeah, it makes sense. You have this huge factory complex already there. All you have to do is modify it to make other stuff,
Yeah.
you know? That's kind of crazy.
But
Yeah.
nowadays, I mean, it's so easy to think. So, okay, so it's so easy to think that we can solve our problems. Like I was reading, I
Yes.
think I was telling you about this, how I was listening to this book, Ending the Pursuit of Happiness. And it's kind of like thinking that we can solve our problems. So like we have this uncomfortable feeling, and then we're like, I don't want this. Let me come up with this whole convoluted path to do something else that I think will solve this problem.
Yeah, it is funny that instead of like instead of trying to just like figure out how to live with ourselves or our situation or accepting things the way they are, we're constantly trying to come up, like you said, with these like convoluted, complicated paths that we need to put ourselves on in order to solve something. And then we think that and we always trick ourselves into thinking like every time that if I just do this, then I'll be happy. Right? And it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
and it's
the
like it didn't
biggest
work for the
mental
last 40
flaw.
some odd years.
Yeah.
Why is it going to keep working, right? It's really
Yeah.
funny.
And all because we can't just deal with being uncomfortable. Like I heard
Dude,
I
not at
heard
all.
someone say, and I just keep repeating this to myself. I'm like, no one ever died from uncomfortable. It's like, but it's
Well,
it's true, because uncomfortable is uncomfortable and you want to get out of being uncomfortable as soon as possible. It's not going to
yeah.
kill you. It's just uncomfortable. But it's like
Well,
we do crazy stuff to not be uncomfortable.
and it's nuts too. I started watching this show, Pan, is it called Panchico? Whatever. But
Pachinko.
Pachinko, there you go. Thank you. Yes. So I was watching this show, Pachinko, and it's about like it's a historical kind of
It's
like
about Al
show.
Pachinko, right?
Yeah, yeah, that guy. So it's about the Koreans and Japanese during 1909-ish to like the World Wars, right? And like what happened. And so they do the show, and it's very good. It's very honest, and like its portrayal of the history and all, and like how these people were treated, the Koreans and all. But they then, so re all these people had really hard lives. The people they focused on, I mean, they were like their country's taken over. They're like basically forced labor, mistreated, whatever. And so they interview some of these women that were alive back then. And I guess some of the characters were based on it at the end of one of the episodes. So they're like, they have to be in their 90s, 100, whatever, somewhere around there. And, I was just blown away because they're still walking around doing stuff. And, they all said like they don't like thinking about that time, obviously. But you think about what people like that went through and then the modern world, and it's like our problems are so minimal almost in comparison. I know they don't
Yeah.
feel that way, but
Well, I disagree. So our problems, like when you compare problems, yes, they
yeah,
seem minimal. Like somebody like, oh, I didn't get the brand new car I wanted. My life is terrible. Yeah, that seems like a super lame problem compared with somebody in a concentration camp. But the thing is, it's
still a
I
problem, and it's still their
there's
problem.
no
Which,
hierarchy of problems and suffering. So like the
yeah.
suffering is the same, and your body's response to it is the same. So I mean, independent of how whatever the problem is, I still think, because like nowadays we have all these like silly little problems, but I think
Yeah.
they're just as vivid and just as real as people's problems were any time in history.
No, I agree. That's fair. I think if it's your problem, it's gonna be there, right? It's gonna be in the forefront of your
Yeah, it's the most
everyday,
most important problem in the world. It's my problem.
ever.
Yeah.
But It was interesting though too, because like one of the things in one of the episodes, one of the guys said he's like, because there was a kid and there was like a huge at one point there was a huge earthquake, I guess, like level a city in Japan. This is back in like 1930 or something. And the one guy grabbed the kid and he's like, look, you can either wallow and feel bad for yourself and you won't do anything. You'll turn into one of those people that just loses everything. He's like, or you have an opportunity to endure. And I was like, that's really interesting because I think this is like kind of the problem with it, right? Is that we put a wrong cause to things. We think that the world cheated us maybe when it didn't, right? We
Hmm.
blame external factors. And the reality is like the situation is what it is. We're always going to have a certain level of control over what we do, and that's all we can do.
And that's it. Yeah.
And if we don't do that, then we're just basically letting things dictate the rest of our life, you know?
Dude, and I mean, you hit the nail on the head with that word endure, because sometimes that's literally all you can do. Like there
Yeah.
are times in my life where I've just been going through such stuff, and it's just like all I focus on is I'm just like I just gotta get through the day and just endure and just hang in there as hard as you can. And eventually it passes. But man, that is like the hardest thing ever because especially in those moments, it seems like hopeless. It's like nothing that it's not possible that things are going to get any better. And
Oh,
you just
yeah.
got to be like, well, just keep holding on. And eventually it does, but it's at those times it seems like it's not going to.
Oh, I mean, it totally does. Like, I mean, we both had severe depression and stuff, and it's like, it really does. It feels insurmountable. Like,
Did
literally.
you
Like,
call it
I remember,
super depression?
did I? I don't know, maybe. I'll have to
You
listen
were
back.
like you were like we both had super depression.
Oh, I
And
might
it's
have
like
been. Oh, I probably
that
was gonna say
sounds
like
like
super. I might have
yeah.
been saying super bad. I don't know. Who knows what I was gonna say, but whatever.
You only have
Yeah.
regular depression. Are
Yeah,
you
I have
depressed that you
super.
don't have super depression? Would you like to be
Mine's
more depressed? You're in luck.
mine's better. But no, I remember thinking, dude, like, especially like when it was really bad, like just not I couldn't imagine how I could possibly like if this is how life was gonna be, like how could I possibly endure through it? But that's also the misthinking, right? It's like the lie to ourselves is
Yeah,
that it's gonna always be this way. It's not gonna
exactly.
always be that way. Things always change. That
Yep.
is a constant in life. So at
Hmm.
some point, it might not be soon, it might take a while, but it will change.
Hmm.
And I think that's where that endurance you can also motivate yourself a little if you remind yourself that sometimes.
Yeah. So how do Stoics handle misattribution? Well, I don't think they did much shopping back then.
No, I
Yeah,
don't think.
because
I don't know.
you don't need too much for the porch.
I always wondered that though, like not this Stoics. I mean, obviously, they talked about, Epicurus talked about artificial desire. So there's clearly like some probably like pining after things you couldn't have or whatever. But a lot of back then I would imagine like a lot of the ultra wealthy stuff was kind of outside of your perspective anyway. You might
Hmm.
see like people come through once in a while, but it's not like it's constantly thrown in your face like it is now, which probably
Yeah.
eased
But
that a
even
little
even
bit.
like I mean Marcus Aurelius, he was super wealthy and he saw that that wasn't the answer.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
right.
Yeah.
He is amazing. It's amazing how humble he was, isn't it? Yeah.
Hmm.
So there's like a few things we could talk about that are related to this, I think, with Stoicism, which
Hmm.
is, one of the first ones I think is important is just like mindfulness and self-examination. And I think,
Hmm.
this isn't, just the Stoics. I think a lot of philosophers were, recognize the importance of self-examination and regular
Yeah, like what the
self-examination and
heck's going
mindfulness.
on here? What's causing this? Because then you don't get the misattribution, you get attribution.
Yeah, right. And I think that's a big one, right? Is like, is my emotional response justified? Or am I actually identifying the right cause? What is the cause of this? Giving ourselves a chance. And I think mindfulness and like self-examination, it's just stopping and giving yourself a chance to actually think about things before you do something. Because I think this is where most of us too probably fall into this, right? Like, I'm depressed, so we just get in the car and go to the mall
Hmm.
instead of instead of actually stopping and asking ourselves, like, what's actually wrong? Like, is that action actually going to solve it, or is it just a distraction? Is picking up my phone and scrolling just an attempt to distract me from what I'm feeling, or is there something else going on? And I
Yeah.
think that's where that can really help us kind of identify what the correct causes of our feelings and kind of work through this maybe in a healthier way. I also think too, because we've talked a lot about just identification too, and mindfulness can also play a role there. Just being like, I don't feel good, you know,
Hmm.
I feel depressed. just saying it to yourself and kind of making it real so you don't just try to distract yourself from it immediately can also be really helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Like I notice my default mode is when I'm feeling irritable or whatever, is like to go do something. And oftentimes that's not ideal because I get myself into situations where I'm just like miserable, like a sourpuss. And especially I'll be
Yeah.
around other people and I'll just so one of my practices is a lot of writing down. I mean, we talk about writing down. So like writing down, so just expressive writing and doing some like daily mood log type of stuff, identifying distortions, but kind of just like stopping and sitting with being uncomfortable and miserable and whatever it is because there's something going on. And if I
Yeah.
just keep ignoring it and just keep trying to do stuff, I'm never going to get to the bottom of it.
Well, I think that's been one of the biggest problems with like our fast-paced way of life now and the instant gratification is we are afraid almost to give ourselves a chance to think. And it's like we're all moving so fast all the time that just like taking a pause to like work through something seems impossible, right? Like, and I think that's a really, yeah, journaling's awesome. Like that's one of the best ones I think to, especially for identifying a why. It can be really just like that expressive writing and just kind of going through the thing,
Yeah, because you can
on
actually pin
paper.
down your thoughts. Like if you just try and do it in your head, your thoughts just go in circles. But like once you write it down, you kind of like pin it down and then you can investigate it and see what's going on.
Yeah, it's funny how often it's like, I need a nap or I should eat
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, right? Yep, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So the another thing too that's really important to us in obviously we talked about before is the dichotomy of control. And this is, I think, a crucial one for this, especially with misattribution, which is, what's within our control. So,
Hmm.
remember that, for the dichotomy of control, basically what's in our control is, our attitudes, how we respond to things, our choices, basically anything we literally have direct control over. Everything else is outside, which puts a lot of stuff outside.
Hmm.
And misattribution, a lot of stuff, we will blame external factors when it's actually us. So we're not recognizing that something's in our control or maybe caused by us, or vice versa, right? We miss that something's outside of our control, but we're pretending like it is in our control and trying to do something.
Okay, so here's an interesting question that I'm sure some people are thinking about. They're like, okay, well, if I go and buy something, that's within my control, and then that's going to make me feel better. Is buying something and the resultant feeling actually in your control?
I would argue no.
Yeah, no.
Feeling's not. No.
Hmm.
Because you don't, the act of going out to the store, yeah, you can decide to get in the car and go drive to the mall or whatever, right? And go to the store. That's true. But whether you feel good from it is not really in your control, especially in that situation. And how long that lasts is not in your control.
That's a big one. Yeah, because you may have been like desiring for this thing for a long time and you think everything will be right once you get it. But what you don't realize is that that feeling lasts for like 1 or 2 days and then it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
Do
you
you ever
have
see
that
some?
thing and the debt forever.
I remember like this, especially like not now, but when I was younger, but I remember like I would have friends and stuff so excited about getting like a new phone or something, especially like when early on when they were really like, when there was big advancements, I would argue between them.
Hmm.
And it's like, and then you would see like within like a week, it's just the thing that they're carrying around all the time now. And it's like lost its appeal, it's lost its novelty.
Oh my
And it's
God.
kind of funny. We see this all the time, right?
I think everybody needs to experience that somewhere in their life to kind of recognize it as not things. Like I had this car that I thought was my dream car and I got it and it was a classic car. So like it
Yeah, I'm
comes with all
laughing
the
because I know
problems
what you're
of
talking
classic
about.
car. Yeah, it comes with all the
Yeah.
problems of classic cars like breaking down all the time and having to be fixed and all this stuff. And so I got my dream car, like literally the exact car. And then it was a headache to just maintain. And then even trying to sell at the end was just a nightmare. So like ever since then I'm always very, it's like careful what you wish for.
Yeah. Well, that's why all those guys like Leno and stuff, they have like people that just maintain them. So they don't have to, I think that's the other thing. It's like, yeah, because it is. It's a lot of work. Um, we've already talked about this a little bit. Suspending judgment's another good one. Just giving ourselves a chance, right? That it happens because misattribution is generally because, again, that rushing. We're in a rush. We're hasty to make some decision or to get to some conclusion and training ourselves just to step back and get more information. Is this, looking, one way to do that would be journaling, assessing what's in our power of control, kind of going through that, asking ourselves, why a bunch of times to try and get to the root cause, but suspending judgment, giving ourselves time. I think that's a crucial one here. And training yourself to do that, that's very important. Building that character trait that you're not going to just, kind of be pushed and pulled constantly all day.
Hmm. Yeah. I don't have
Yeah.
any
And
response for that.
well, it's a good one, and you don't really need to, right? And then there's just a few other things that are related to, like, obviously using logic and evidence, right? Being rational about things, not letting our
Oh,
emotions
right.
dictate what we're
Okay, so that's
doing.
the hardest thing ever because we say it all the time like it's
I
this
know.
easy thing. It's just be logical, just be rational. And it's
Come
like
on.
this misattribution stuff happens because we're 100% not rational. We're just these
Yeah.
emotional things
Dude,
like flying off the handle all the time.
it's crazy. Like, it's crazy to me how powerful emotions are, too. Like, when you really, I mean, that is why social media works, right? It's why advertising works. It's because our emotions are so easy, one, to trigger, and two, to move us to action. Like, you're not going to get moved to action if you're just like, that's a good argument most of the time, right? But you make somebody angry, instant.
Dude,
Like,
okay, so I saw this thing a while back where like it was I think it was down in Florida. And I mean, granted, people in Florida are, people in Florida, but anyways, there was this guy on a motorcycle and he got into an argument with a guy in a car. And then the guy in the motorcycle sped off and the guy in the car went and hit the dude on the motorcycle and killed him.
what?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And so it's like how could anyone do that stupid stuff? But this is like what emotions do. Like
Yeah.
clearly you said something to the guy and it just like triggered whatever inside of him that is just like this animal instinct that's like I need to kill or be killed. And then you go and do that stuff and that just impacts your life forever.
And you know what, too? It's also probably misattribution. He's probably having a bad day.
Yeah.
This was an opportunity to take it out,
Yeah,
and
and
he
he
made a
I
really
mean
stupid choice.
yeah, I mean, he
Right?
might have been thinking like, "Oh, I'm just gonna tap him or something like that, scare him a little bit," and it killed him.
Yeah.
Who knows? But like, yeah, it's just crazy
But that's the thing,
emotions.
right? So, no, they are. And I think this is where, taking a step back, looking at our reasoning and just questioning our emotions before we act impulsively is always a good idea. And this can be just like using calming exercises, like counting to 10, breathing, removing yourself from a situation, like in the car, right? Pulling over in a parking lot and just giving yourself 10 minutes to calm down before you start driving again.
Right?
Let the guy get away from you, right? That kind of stuff's important, but it's also, it takes a lot. It does take practice. It's not easy. I mean, we talked about this, like even identifying our emotions both took a lot. It takes a long time to just remind yourself and do this and like be aware.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a hard
I've
one.
noticed, I'm not sure if it's due to like all this stuff that I like the Feeling Good podcast or if it's due to the just like I've been trying to smile a lot more. I don't know what the cause of it is, but like I've noticed that uh my rage threshold has kind of come down. Like the stuff
No, that's
that
good.
used to piss me off a lot more, not as much. I can just see it and I'm just like, okay, that's what that is. Okay, cool. Breathe. Keep walking. You know?
That's awesome. But you know what, though? That's a good example of like, I think this is the other problem where we, people want things to get better and they'll like turn to stoicism and stuff like that. And they expect these like wild results. And the reality is like you're going to get marginal improvement. Like that is great improvement. And that shows that it's working, right? Whatever you're doing, whatever it is working. And it's better than it was, but it's not going to be instantly all of a sudden this is gone, right? And I think that's also something to remind yourself that like any of this stuff takes time to practice and to put into
And
practice.
it's not a happily ever after. It's never going to be a happily ever after.
No.
It's always going to just be like
Rip
momentary.
that band-aid off right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, exactly. It's only ever going to be momentary. And then you're going to come
Yeah.
back and you're going to struggle with it again and again and again throughout life. But those are opportunities to address it again.
Yeah. And I think one other thing I would add too is this is another good one is just reframing. Like think about the situation, take a step back, take a broader view. Like maybe like, whatever happened, maybe it wasn't intended to me. Or maybe, like take the incident of the motorcycle on the guy, right? Maybe, the guy in the car says, well, maybe the guy on the motorcycle is having a bad day.
Hmm.
And maybe, maybe that's why he said something. Instead of just jumping to it was directed at me, they're attacking me, right? reframe it to a broader picture, and try to think of it from a different perspective and see if that can help as well. Because that can calm us down too by kind of, both empathizing but also looking at the larger picture and sort of seeing what other causes there might be.
Yeah, absolutely. If you zoom out on a time horizon, that's helpful. Just
Yeah.
remember that, whatever this rock hurtling through space is doing, it totally doesn't care about you and your problems. Uh, or
I find
like,
myself saying that like too. Like, well, they're all dying to die too. So
yeah,
like it's like, you know?
or like there's another example that he gives in, I think, on his podcast where he talks about like if there was someone from Mars and they were looking down on us and seeing this situation, help them understand it. Why is it important? Like, what does it
Yeah.
matter what some guy on a motorcycle says to you? Like, why
Yeah.
why is that so important? Oh, well,
You don't
he
even know the
insulted me and
person,
my
right?
family. And it's like, okay, well, why does that matter? And it's like take a look at it from someone who doesn't have your perspective, someone from looking down from space who doesn't have our customs at all.
Well, it's like we started out saying, right? Our problems always feel super large and important from our perspective. So removing that perspective can be a really effective way to kind of reframe them and look at them differently and maybe take that sting away so that it's not an emotional response. I think that's it's a really good idea too. Like thinking about like somebody from a different planet or something, that's a really good one. Or like another country or something, right? Like what if you had to explain this situation to somebody from elsewhere?
Mm.
How would that look?
Yeah.
And I think, it's important to point out too that this stuff is hard to catch. So also use your community, talk to people. That's another one. If you don't like journaling, sit down with somebody, it's a friend and just talk to them about it and try to think like,
Hmm.
what's wrong here? Am I being crazy? Like, is this, and I think you can get a lot from just that because your friend will help you also, ideally, they'll come down from an
Yeah.
emotional high.
And you can even learn from your own errors. Like when you do stuff that didn't go right, be like, okay, well, what happened? And you can write that down. And then you'd be like, well, ideally, what would I have liked to have happened? And then how in the future am I going to make sure that that type of thing happens as opposed to what happens naturally?
Wait, we can learn from the past?
It's tricky. It's tricky, but it's
That's a tough
possible.
one.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well,
Yeah.
there you have it then. So, modern stoicism, misattribution. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. Thanks again. Then you notice you're thinking. Awesome suggestion for this episode. If you guys have suggestions, feel free to drop them in the comments or email us. You can find our email in the show notes. We'll be back later this week with another episode. This is the Existential Stoic Podcast. Catch it on YouTube, wherever you get podcasts. Until next time, though, later, Andy.
Later, Danny.